Sometimes destiny doesn't shout. Sometimes it whispers quietly, softly, right before the world changes. And sometimes the difference between those who rise and those who fall is simply the courage to listen before the storm arrives. Because wealth, real wealth, isn't created in the noise. It's created in the silence before the noise. And today I want to take you into that silence. Let's talk about the year's global debt crisis, not as a headline, not as a news story, but as a living force that is shaping your future, your family's future, and the entire financial destiny of the world. You see, money is a strange teacher. It never warns you loudly until it's already too late. And the biggest mistakes, they happen slowly, then suddenly, just like this crisis. Before we dive deep, let me tell you something that might sound simple, but it's a truth most people don't learn until life forces them to the people who survive financial storms aren't the lucky ones. They're the ones who paid attention when everyone else was distracted. I've met countless people in my life, some wealthy, some struggling, some trying to rebuild. And almost every story had one common theme. They ignored the early warning signs. We're living in a time where the world is drowning in debt, household debt, corporate debt, government debt, central bank debt, and yet people walk as if nothing is happening. But the system isn't built to handle this pressure forever. And if you listen closely, you can hear the cracks forming. Let me take you back to a conversation I had many years ago with a man who owned a small hardware shop, a simple, hardworking man. He told me, "My business didn't collapse because of one bad day. It collapsed because I kept ignoring the little signs telling me things were changing." That sentence never left me because it's not just a business story. It's a life story. It's a market story. And today, it's a global story. The world is ignoring the signs. Signs that the debt load is too heavy. Signs that interest rates have pushed people to the edge. Signs that governments are borrowing more than they can ever repay. Signs that currencies are becoming weaker month after month, year after year. People look at the economy the same way that man looked at his shop, hoping things will magically fix themselves. But money doesn't respond to hope. It responds to action, to awareness, to discipline, to preparation. Let's pause, take a breath, and ask something simple. What happens when an entire global monetary system becomes too fragile to support itself? Think about it. If one household collapses, the damage is small. If one corporation collapses, the damage is bigger. But when entire governments can no longer service their debt, when the system itself becomes the weakest link, then the world doesn't correct gently, it could violently. People lose trust, markets lose balance, currencies lose stability, and the dominoes start falling fast. But listen to me carefully, this is not a message of fear. It's a message of preparation, of clarity, of awakening. Because every crisis, every single one carries two types of people. The ones who panic when the storm arrives, and the ones who quietly position themselves before the storm even forms. The second group is small, very small, but they are the ones who walk away with generational wealth. Not because they were geniuses, not because they were lucky, but because they paid attention long before the rest of the world woke up. Now let me tell you a small story, something real, something I witnessed during one of the toughest market downturns. There was a young man, I'll call him Amir. He worked a low-paying job, barely surviving month to month, but he had one thing most people around him didn't, a long-term view. When the markets were booming, he didn't chase hype. When people were buying luxury, he was buying knowledge. When his friends made jokes about saving, he invested quietly, little by little, in assets he understood. Then came the downturn. People around him panicked. They sold. They cried. They blamed the economy. But Amir smiled, not because he was rich, not yet, but because for the first time in his life, the world slowed down to his pace. The assets he couldn't afford before were suddenly within reach. The opportunities people ignored for years suddenly became visible. And he took them. Slowly, patiently, confidently. Today, Amir is financially free, not because he made one big move, but because he prepared when others were sleeping. The lesson is simple. In every crisis, someone cries and someone buys. Which side you fall on depends on whether you open your eyes now or later, XXY. And this brings us back to the debt crisis staring us in the face. The signs are here. The warnings are here. The numbers don't lie. They never did. The monetary system is inching closer to a point where it can no longer reset gently. And when it resets violently, those who aren't prepared lose more than money. They lose time, opportunities, years of progress, and sometimes their hope. But those who prepare, they gain a future they once thought was impossible. And that's why we're here, to understand, to prepare, to rise. This is only the beginning. Before we go deeper, I want you to sit with a question, a quiet, heavy question most people avoid. What happens when a global financial system reaches its breaking point and there's no reset button left to press? Because that's where we're heading. Not in a day, not in a week, but step by step, policy by policy, decade by decade, we've been walking toward a cliff without realizing how close the edge truly is. And the world keeps pretending everything is fine. Governments borrow more, central banks print more, people spend more, corporations leverage more. It's the same pattern repeating again and again, right before every major financial collapse in history. But this time, the scale is global, and global problems rarely end quietly. Let's deepen this. Think of the monetary system like a building, a massive structure built on pillars of debt, trust, and liquidity. Now imagine one pillar cracks, it shakes, but the building stands. Another crack, still standing but unstable. Then a third, a fourth, and suddenly the entire structure becomes so fragile that even a small shock, a recession, a war, a currency crisis, a bond sell-off can take the whole thing down. Most people don't see this. They live on the top floors where everything looks polished and comfortable, but the foundation is where the truth lies. And that truth is this. We're supporting a system that was never designed to carry this much weight, sis. The debt is too massive. The interest is too heavy. The currencies are too weak. The trust is too fragile. People believe money is stable because it has always worked, but systems fail the moment people stop believing in them. And let me tell you something very real. The belief is fading. Let me share a moment I witnessed during an old market downturn. A man, a well-dressed executive, walked into a bank confident, careless, almost arrogant. He had always lived life in the fast lane, bold, spending high credit, big investments. To him, money was abundant, limitless, always available. But that day, something changed. He learned that the bank had frozen his credit line. His investments were down. His margin was gone. His debts were due. He didn't get hit by a crisis. He was the crisis. He stood frozen, staring at a single sentence the banker told him. Sir, the system can no longer support your debt. I watched his face change from confidence to confusion to fear. And it struck me that that's exactly what's happening to the world right now. The global system is the wealthy executive. The collapse hasn't hit fully yet, but the warnings are already at the counter, politely, quietly telling us the system can no longer support this debt. Most people will ignore this until the day the shock arrives, but a few, the thoughtful few, will act early. And that's why you're here, because awareness is the first step toward protection. Let's break it down even more deeply. When countries print too much money, people lose purchasing power. When they borrow too much, investors lose confidence. When they manipulate interest rates, markets lose balance. And when all three break at the same time, when inflation rises, debt rises, and growth falls, that's when systems snap. History has shown it repeatedly. The Roman Empire, the Weimar Republic, Argentina, Zimbabwe, Sri Lanka, Lebanon. Different eras, different economies, same story. A system overloaded by debt always collapses, and it always starts slowly, quietly, subtly, then all at once. But here's the part most people don't understand. The collapse is not the danger. Being unprepared is, as a crisis doesn't destroy everyone. It destroys the ones who believed it would never come. The ones who watched warnings turn into disasters. The ones who thought the system was immortal. The ones who confused stability with safety. But the few who remained calm, who educated themselves, who built emergency savings, who kept cash ready, who invested wisely, who avoided unnecessary debt. They didn't just survive, they positioned themselves for the greatest opportunities of their lives. Because crises do not eliminate opportunity, they magnify it. Let me remind you of something powerful, something timeless. Wealth favors the prepared, misfortune punishes the distracted. Right now the world is distracted, lost in noise, lost in trends, lost in superficial comfort. But the prepared few, they are quietly strengthening their foundations, learning, saving, investing with intention, reducing unnecessary risks, watching markets with clarity, not fear. You're not here by accident. You're here because something that inside you knows the truth, that the system is vulnerable, that the signals are real, and that the future belongs to those who stay awake while others sleep. Let's go deeper, not into the numbers, not into the headlines, but into the human side of this crisis, the side people rarely talk about. Because behind every chart, every debt metric, every economic forecast, there are real lives. Families struggling to buy groceries, workers trapped between rising prices and stagnant wages, savers watching their money lose value every year, young people losing hope because the cost of living keeps climbing faster than their dreams. And all of this is happening while governments keep borrowing more and printing more because that's the only tool they have left. But every solution that works in the short term makes the long term darker. That's the trap. And we're already deep inside it. Let's slow down here. And I want you to imagine something. Imagine you're carrying a backpack, a little heavy, but manageable. That's normal debt. Now imagine someone quietly adds a brick to your backpack every day without telling you. You don't notice the extra weight at first. You keep walking. Life feels normal. But after a year, you're carrying hundreds of bricks, and suddenly you can't move. That's the global economy right now. The bricks are invisible to the average person. Interest payments, unfunded liabilities, currency devaluation, rising deficits, compounding debt. You don't see them, but you feel them. Through inflation, through collapsing purchasing power, through rising taxes, through financial stress. And one day the weight becomes too much. The monetary system can no longer walk. That moment is what experts call a systemic break. But I want to speak to you not as experts do, but as life teaches us. When a structure carries more than it was designed for, it doesn't slowly bend, it suddenly snaps, and the world is dangerously close to that snap. But here's where the story shifts from danger to awakening, because while most people see crisis as destruction, wise people see it as transition. A transition between one system and the next, between old rules and new opportunities, between scarcity and potential abundance. Because every time the world resets, those who understand the reset build the next generation of wealth. Let me tell you a story, one that changed how I viewed money forever. Years ago, I met a man who had lost everything in a market crash. His business collapsed. His investments wiped out, his savings almost gone. People avoided him because they thought he was finished. But he told me something I never forgot. When the world broke, I broke with it. But when the rebuilding began, I rebuilt faster than everyone else because I had nothing left to lose. He studied harder. He saved every penny. He invested with discipline. He asked the questions he had ignored during good times. 10 years later, he was wealthier than before. And I realized something powerful. People fear collapse, but collapse is also clarity. It wipes away illusions and forces truth to the surface, guess. Right now, the global system is full of illusions of never-ending growth. Illusions of infinite money, illusions of permanent stability. But reality doesn't bend forever. When the clarity comes, everything changes. Currencies reset, markets reprice, debt evaporates or restructures, asset classes shift in value, new winners emerge, old giants fall. And through all of this, a quiet truth remains. The people who enter the storm prepared mentally, emotionally, financially walk out of it transformed, stronger, smarter, more resilient, because crises don't create character, they reveal it. Let's talk about that preparation now, because this isn't just a video. This is a turning point for you. There are three kinds of people in a global financial crisis. One, resident the unaware, they don't see it coming. They panic, they freeze, they lose the most. Two, why? The aware but unprepared, they know something is wrong, but they don't take real action. They survive, but barely. Three, the strategically prepared, they study, they stay calm, they position themselves, they watch the cracks and align themselves for the moment opportunity appears. These people don't gamble, they don't react emotionally, they move with intention, not fear. And when the monetary system resets, they become the quiet beneficiaries of the biggest wealth transfer of their lifetime. Not because they are smarter, but because they are awake. Now let's talk about something people rarely want to admit. Money is emotional. Fear can destroy wealth faster than a market crash. Greed can blind you faster than inflation. Impatience can rob you faster than taxes. That's why the greatest investors aren't the smartest, they are the most disciplined. And discipline comes from clarity. Clarity of who you are, clarity of what you want, clarity of why you're preparing. Right now, you are building that clarity right here, right now, in this moment. By understanding the crisis, you are already rising above it. There is a question many people avoid, maybe because it feels too big, too heavy, too real to face. What if the monetary system as we know it doesn't break suddenly, but slowly suffocates over time? People expect crashes. They expect explosions. They expect dramatic endings. But reality is often different. Sometimes the system doesn't collapse overnight. Sometimes it erodes from the inside, quietly and visibly, until the day the collapse becomes undeniable. Inflation, currency debasement, rising interest payments, falling productivity, declining trust. Every one of these is a piece of the puzzle. And the picture the puzzle reveals a future where the old economic rules no longer work. But here's the truth that most people never hear. When an old system dies, a new one is already being born. This is not the end. This is a transition toward a world where money moves differently. Power shifts globally. Currencies compete in new ways. Digital systems replace analog ones. And wealth is built with new tools, new structures, new strategies. But transitions are never smooth. When one era ends, it takes with it the illusions people relied on. It forces them to see themselves without disguise. And that can be painful. But it is also liberating because once you stop expecting the world to stay the same, you finally open your eyes to the opportunities hiding in the change. Let's step into those opportunities now. Not fantasies, not get rich quick traps, not hype, but real grounded possibilities that open up when a financial reset begins. There are four major opportunities that emerge during monetary breakdowns. Assess one, undervalued assets. When panic rises, prices fall, but value doesn't vanish, it becomes hidden. Real estate. Businesses, commodities, equities all become accessible to those with patience and cash. Hey, two, a hard asset set. When currencies weaken, run to solidity. Gold, land, real businesses, productive assets, they become the anchors people trust. Three, innovation booms. Crisis kills old industries, but gives birth to new ones. The people who step into innovation early often build generational wealth. F of 40, debt restructuring cycles. When debt resets, new beginnings appear. Assets change hands. New business models rise, strong minds replace weak ones. This is how financial history has always worked. Every collapse rearranges the world. Every rearrangement creates opportunity. The only difference between those who win and those who lose is whether they entered the storm blind or awake. Let me share a story, a deeply personal one. I once met a man who had lived through 5 major economic downturns. He had seen inflation destroy savings, recessions destroy jobs, bubbles destroy portfolios, and currency crises destroy entire economies. I asked him how he survived all of them, smiled, and said, "I never assumed stability was permanent. I prepared when others relaxed when others panicked." That line is the essence of financial wisdom. Anyone can thrive when the world is calm. Only the disciplined thrive when the world is trembling. And right now, the world is trembling. Debt is at historic highs. Currencies are losing purchasing power. Interest rates are suffocating economies. Trade is shifting. Geopolitics is volatile. Global trust is fading. But listen closely, because this next part matters deeply. You don't need to fear the storm. You just need to understand it. I see that as fear paralyzes. Understanding empowers. Fear locks you in place. Understanding moves you forward. Fear makes you reactive. Understanding makes you strategic. Right now, you are choosing understanding, and that choice will shape your future. But let's talk about something we haven't touched yet. Mindset, discipline, inner strength, patience, guys. Because in a crisis, these matter as much as money, sometimes even more. A person with money but no discipline will lose everything. A person with discipline but little money will build something. A person with clarity will find opportunity. A person with panic will destroy opportunity. This is why your mindset is your greatest investment. And this crisis, this global debt storm, this monetary reset will test every mindset on earth. Some will crumble, some will resist, and a rare few will rise. Those who rise will be the ones who stay calm when others panic, stay patient when others rush, stay informed when others stay ignorant, stay disciplined when others chase greed. And most importantly, stay committed to the long term, because wealth is not built in the moment of chaos. It is built in the decisions leading up to it. And every decision you make today shapes your tomorrow. Oh, we are nearing the end of this journey. You've walked through the danger, the warning signs, the opportunities, and the mindset. But there is one last step, the step where all of this connects, the step where awareness becomes clarity, and clarity becomes power. As we reach the end of this journey together, I want you to pause for a moment, not to think about the markets or the crisis, but to think about yourself, because everything we've explored, every warning, every pattern, every opportunity is ultimately leading you toward one truth. You are stronger than the storm. You are wiser than the noise, and you are more capable than the world has ever allowed you to believe. People look at financial crisis as destruction, but I want you to see this moment differently. This is not the death of the system. This is the birth of your awareness. A new chapter, a new mindset, a new level of clarity. Money, markets, economies, they rise and fall. But the one thing that never collapses, unless you allow it to, is your inner foundation, your discipline, your patience, your courage, your vision. These are the assets no crisis can devalue. And now you carry them with you. Oh, let me leave you with something deeply personal, something life whispered to me long ago. When the world becomes uncertain, become certain about who you are, not loud, not aggressive, not reckless, just steady, grounded, awake. Because in every collapse, there is a moment of silence, a moment when the old falls away and the new begins to rise. That moment is coming, and you calm, prepared, intentional, you will be ready. Not with fear, not with panic, but with clarity, with perspective, with a heart that sees beyond the chaos. Remember, our storms, debt cycles don't last. Fear doesn't last at us, but wise decisions do, strong foundations do, and a purpose-driven vision lasts longer than any crisis. So walk forward with confidence, with peace, with the quiet strength of someone who understands the world and understands themselves. Your future is not defined by the system that collapses. Your future is defined by the mindset you build today. And that mindset is already awaking within you. Thank you for walking this journey with me. Stay aware, stay disciplined, stay grounded, and most importantly, stay true to the future you are building. Your wealth, your peace, your vision, they begin now.